Hey everyone, I'm Ashleigh Banfield, and this is Drop Dead Serious. You may have heard about this. I can't sleep over this, but there's a story out of rural Ohio that is so incredibly disturbing. I don't really know where to begin with this because investigators, I am sure, are shattered today, only because I know this has happened before. These investigators in Ohio walked into a small house in a place called Hamden, and they did not just find a child in distress, they found 16 kids in real bad condition. And when I say real bad, I don't think it gets worse. 16 kids, ranging from toddlers to teenagers. They said living in conditions that were unimaginable. Human waste inside the home, children in serious medical condition, like serious. Some reportedly unable to speak. One 18-year-old who, according to investigators, could not even write out her own name. The Ohio Attorney General said that these kids looked almost like feral animals. Let me repeat that. The AG of Ohio said that these kids looked almost like feral animals. The sheriff said his livestock was kept in better conditions than these children. And maybe the most haunting part of all of this is that the investigators say they weren't even expecting to find kids like this. Like, that wasn't why they were there. They were there on a search warrant for something completely different. Another investigation, unrelated, slightly related, unrelated. They're not saying what, but it wasn't about 16 kids living in a disgusting hovel like animals and almost in the condition of animals, unable to speak. When they got inside, they uncovered what officials are now calling prolonged, extreme, interfamilial neglect and abuse. Yeah, the interfamilial caught me too. Officials say these children, again, ranging in age from 20 months old all the way up to 18 years old, may have spent most of the last 4 years confined to just one room. And lest you think it's a room like the one behind me, not even close. They say the room is roughly 12 by 12. Just pace that out wherever you are right now. 12 steps by 12 steps. A prison cell is 6 by 10, often. So 12 by 12, 16 kids. There was human waste all around them. They had not been to school. There were little to no medical records for any of these kids. And 4 adults were in that home. And 4 adults have now been charged. They are Gary Siders Sr., Gary Siders Jr., presumably his son, Christina Siders, presumably Sr.'s wife, and Elizabeth Siders, presumably the younger wife and presumably mom to all of these kids. Each one of these 4 adults living in that home, grandparents, parents, they are all facing 16 counts of child endangering, each one a second-degree felony. But trust me, I know how this game works. That may not be the end of it. That may be just the start of the kinds of charges that we're going to see in this case. You don't get to 16 kids in a 12 by 12 room with just a simple child endangerment charge. There could be, and I believe there will likely be, so much more to this and so many more charges to come. But let's go back to where all of this began, where the investigation began, where the story began. I'm about to interview the lead detective from the Riverside County Sheriff's Department who responded to the case of the 13 Turpin children who were rescued from their home in conditions that were remarkably similar. In some cases worse, in some cases different. There were chains involved in the Turpin kids' case. They were woefully underweight. I mean, beyond a medical emergency underweight. And this lead detective was the first one to see these kids upon their rescue and then led the case on their second rescue after the foster system abused them as well. The home that they were put into, some of them were abused even worse than when they were abused by their parents, Louise and David Turpin, who are serving life sentences. That lead detective is going to join me on the podcast today. And don't miss it, because Detective Thomas Salisbury, that guy has seen some things and he knows some things, and he has some thoughts about what's about to happen in Ohio and what's in store for those kids as well. So that's coming up in just a moment. So I can take you to Tuesday morning, June 30th, about 10 o'clock in the morning. Law enforcement officers show up at this home in Hamden, Ohio. They're there to execute a search warrant, right? The officials described the search warrant as something pertaining to an ongoing investigation involving allegations of domestic abuse and child neglect, but not this, right? It was something unrelated, slightly related. It's a little foggy. There has also been some reporting that court records show there's a warrant that was issued that same day for Gary Siders Sr., that's Grandpa, on unrelated public indecency charges. So, yeah, my mind's going to the same place yours is. Public indecency, got it, check, noted. 16 kids jammed into a 12 by 12 room. Some of them can't even speak. One can't write her name at 18 years old. Got it, check. I'm starting to see a pattern here. Officials haven't publicly confirmed that the warrant that brought them to the house was specific to anything that they actually did find in the house or that indecency thing. But when the law enforcement officers got there, they went inside. And that's when they found the 16 kids. That's when they found the 12 by 12 room. The children were taken out of the home, and all of them were taken to the hospital, different hospitals. Some needed to be evaluated. Others needed to be treated right away and were released, but still more kids were so serious, and the care they needed was so serious. 7 of them were transported to hospitals in Columbus. 2 of them were flown by a medical helicopter. So the condition that 2 kids were in was so bad, they had to be life flighted? Are you kidding me? And this wasn't as the result of a phone call, help me, my child is in dire need of medical care, we may need a chopper. No, they were discovered that way. No one was calling them in. Nobody really knew about these kids. At one point, one of the 16 children was listed in critical condition. I'm just trying to picture that room. What was in it? What kind of beds? What kind of facilities? A bucket? A corner? How could a child be in critical condition and just be found that way? Officials described the conditions inside the house as deplorable, horrendous, disgusting, also an adjective used. Attorney General Andy Wilson called what investigators encountered there as, and I will quote him, pure evil. Pure evil. And he later said that the evidence uncovered since then only reinforced his assessment, their assessment, undoubtedly the case against these 4 adults. The sheriff did say that investigators did not find any cages in the home. Well, isn't that a bright spot? No cages, yay. But he also said this was the kind of thing that they are not used to seeing in America. And the words that keep coming up from officials are prolonged and extreme. Prolonged and extreme interfamilial neglect and abuse. The investigators say members of the Siders family had lived in multiple Ohio counties since at least 2008, that they'd been here in Vinton County for about 4 years, kind of travelers, getting around. But during that time, investigators believed that the family pretty much avoided establishing any medical records or government records or school records or anything to suggest these children exist. They're alive. They're Americans. The Attorney General, again, Andy Wilson, said, quote, "These folks were pretty good at hiding these kids." And one of the neighbors, I should tell you, told the Associated Press that he saw no kids at all. None, not one kid. There's 16 kids who live at this house. I have 2, and I was en fuego, and they were everywhere. Outside, inside, slamming doors, banging doors, all of it. 16 kids, and the neighbor said, I never saw one. Another neighbor told WOWK that she'd seen some of the children once at a yard sale and noticed that they were dirty, but just assumed that they'd been playing outside. And now she says she's losing sleep. And honestly, I don't blame her. Who wouldn't? Can you imagine thinking, oh, kids, dirty, maybe impoverished, who knows, but it's not a crime to be poor. It's not a crime to be dirty. Lots of kids get super dirty during the day, right? Presumably they get a bath. I don't know if these kids ever did. So let's talk about the adults in the room, or probably not in the 12 by 12 room. That was probably just for the 16 kids. Let's talk about the adults who lived in that home. 4 of them. Gary Siders Sr., 73 years old. There's a picture. Christina Siders, presumably his wife, 67 years old. Gary Siders Jr., presumably their son, 36 years old. And Elizabeth Siders, presumably the junior's wife, 33 years old. I know. You're thinking, 33 years old? 16 kids? Wow. Okay, wow. And guess what? That isn't even the half of it. There are more kids. I'll get to that. Gary Siders Jr. and Elizabeth Siders are a married couple. The marriage records out of West Virginia show that Gary Siders Jr. and Elizabeth Siders got married on March 31st, 2008. And on that date, he was 18 and she was all of 15. So I'm with you. Better been somebody there to approve that. And the court records do show it. Apparently, those records show that her parents and the judge gave consent to this marriage. 18-year-old Gary, 15-year-old Elizabeth. The records also show that Gary had completed 9th grade and Elizabeth had completed 8th grade. I don't know if they went further, but they got a baby now at that point and many more to come. So I'm thinking school might not have been in the picture after that. Now authorities, look, they haven't publicly confirmed whether all of these children found in the home are siblings or all from this younger couple, or God forbid, a mix of grandpa and the generations, or grandma and the generation. I don't know. They also have not stated how each of the 16 kids is related. Who's mom, who's dad? Do they even know? I don't know. But here's one detail that really stands out. The oldest of those kids was born just 2 months after Gary Siders Jr. and Elizabeth Siders were married at 18 and 15. So I am starting to put the math out here and put the pieces together. A 15-year-old girl is pregnant with her 18-year-old boyfriend, and at 8 months pregnant, the parents said, you're getting married. Or they said, we want to get married. Whatever it was, parents were there to convince a judge this is a good idea. Who knows what it looked like back then? I can't cast aspersions on anyone back then. Who knows? Wouldn't be my choice. You're a kid at 15. A baby. I think you're a kid at 18. Certainly they both can't even order a beer, but they can have a child, and apparently many more. The criminal complaint lists the children's ages, and, pour a drink. It's going to take a while to get through this. 18, 16, 15, 14, 13, now we get a year break, 11, another year break, 9, 8, another year break, 6, 5, and twins who are 4, and twins who are 20 months old. Jesus. That's a kid almost every year since you're 15, and a couple sets of twins. And there's more. Wait for it. State records show that Gary Jr. and Elizabeth also had a set of twin girls who were born prematurely. That was in 2022. They are not with us. because on November 20th of that year, 2022, they died. Their names were Bailey Lee Siders and Faith Lee Siders. And according to their death records, they were extremely premature, estimated at about 24 weeks gestation. And here's another detail, as if this wasn't the most explosive story. This one I didn't see coming. They were conjoined twins, born conjoined twins. So obviously, that's a story from 2022, and the officials say those conjoined twins who were born and died, not connected to the current child endangering charges. But, wait for it, because who knows what the circumstances were 4 years ago. You have conjoined twins and a boatload of others. Who knows what the circumstances were? Probably real hard to prove, but maybe some of the kids might have a story to tell about what was going on when Elizabeth was pregnant with those kids, those conjoined twins. So put the number now to 18, likely, that Elizabeth Siders gave birth to. 18 since the age of 15, and she is 33. So those gaps that I mentioned in the years of the kids, there's at least 2 gaps of a year. Yeah, could have been one of those. That could have been the year of the conjoined twins. And officials are now saying that this whole conjoined twins piece adds another layer to the family history. And investigators are combing through this as well. So, watch this space. Stay tuned. Will there be something else associated with the 2022 conjoined twins who didn't make it past 24 weeks? The 4 adults appeared in Vinton County Court on July 1st. Each of them, I said before, facing 16 counts of endangering children, and each of those counts carries a potential prison sentence of between 2 and 12 years. But honest to Jesus, I just can't see it staying there. No, I can't see a charge staying at just that. And I say just that, it's still a felony, but endangering children, that's it? Wait till the kids can talk, if they can. Wait till they tell their stories, if they can. Wait till they give their evidence, because they know some things. And my suspicion is, wait for it. Superseding indictments. The proverbial fucking book that will be thrown at these people. All 4 of these people pleaded not guilty. And officials have said that, guess what? More charges could be coming. Investigation's still active. So yeah, I'm with them. But the defense attorneys are also weighing in already. And they're saying, making it clear that they're still trying to figure out what the hell happened in there. Like, wait, let us figure this out. Because Elizabeth, her attorney, Elizabeth is presumably the mom of all these kids, the one who was 15 when she was entering into this marriage. I don't say forced. I don't know what the story was. Her parents gave the blessing. A judge gave the blessing. She's 8 months pregnant. Elizabeth Siders' attorney, his name is Tommy Stoley. He said, and I will quote Mr. Stoley, "At this point in time, we are still not sure whether my client, Elizabeth, is a victim herself or not." What another layer. Wow. Not on my bingo card. But yeah, I guess that's possible too. She was 15. Baby was born. Who knows what happened inside that fucked up house of horrors? Was this a willing marriage where they just loved kids but then just didn't know how or what to do with them and chose to do something criminal? Was that the story? Were those older parents somehow complicit in this? Were they forcing pregnancies for some crazed cult-like belief? God, were they part of the pregnancies? Elizabeth is not the only defendant whose status is now complicated, because Gary Siders Sr., grandpa, who, there's what he looks like. He's 73. And this one came out of the blue, shocked the hell out of me. And I started reading the reasons behind this next decision I'm going to explain to you. I didn't quite agree, but it's not my county. He had his bond modified, and it is not what you think. The reason is not what you'd expect. The Vinton County prosecutor, his name is William Archer, says that during the transportation to court, Grandpa, Gary Siders Sr., had a fall. He fell, and apparently a medical issue resulted. And he had to be taken to the hospital, and the doctors determined that he has a serious medical condition, and apparently it requires specialized care outside of their area. That's what you call expensive. And the prosecutor said that the county did not want to put that medical burden on the local taxpayers, because if he remained in jail on his $300,000 bond, which, looking at that house, looking at the condition of the kids, I don't think that they've got 4 times $300,000 to bail everybody out, or even the 10% you need. The county would have had to shoulder the financial burden of that medical treatment. And that's when the locals were like, we can't do that. So the prosecutors instead agreed to modify his bond. Wait for it, pour a drink, pour some absinthe. They modified it to recognizance. That means, hope you'll come back. We're trusting you. We're hoping you're going to do the right thing. You're on your own recognizance. So yeah, bond is modified to recognizance for the purpose of medical treatment. Well, maybe he can't walk. And if that's the case, that'd be a great thing. Because I don't want this fucking guy walking. Not while there's 16 kids in your home, a home you're in, and you're only 72. You're not 102. And their conditions are so dire, all need medical attention. Some are in critical, some need life flight. And it doesn't stop there. Gary Siders Sr. has a defense attorney, and that defense attorney has filed, are you ready? I guess I'm not surprised here. Certainly looking at his picture. Filed a motion regarding his competency. So now his competency is going to have to be evaluated. And lest you think, whoa, does that mean you trying to get off on insanity? Doesn't mean that. What it means is, do you even understand the charges against you? Are you even able to help your attorney to help you? And if you can't, that's what you call incompetence. You can't even get into the courtroom to face a trial or to face court activity like a deal offer or anything, a plea. Like if you're not competent, you can't even walk in that courtroom and face the music in any way. So yeah, that's where we're at, y'all. Senior there, Grandpa, apparently his lawyer says, I'm not so sure he can even face a court proceeding. I don't think he's got it. Not so yet for those other 3. Grandma, Dad, Mom. Meanwhile, all the kids, okay. The kids are currently in the custody of the Vinton County Public Children's Safety Agency, and the Ohio Department of Children and Youth says that they have been placed into safe environments. Oh, I hope they have been. And while I want to feel good about that statement, I have PTSD over the Turpin family. Because I was there. I lived long enough to know that the Turpins had 13 kids who were found in deplorable conditions, including chains. One of them escaped and begged for help and blew open what was going on in the Turpin household. And they were all put into safe environments afterwards. And some of those safe environments were even worse. The abuse and the suffering was even worse in foster care. So forgive me if I'm not going to be all Pollyanna about this rescue yet. I want to know that this truly is a safe environment for these victims, these 16 kids. I also want to know what's going to happen with the 18-year-old, because the 18-year-old isn't a kid officially. But vulnerable? Fuck yes. She can't write out her own name at 18. What hope does that kid have to look after herself as an adult? So yeah, I'm assuming the state is doing something about her vulnerable situation. The officials say for their part that teams are working to make sure that these children get all of the necessary services and support, including medical care and behavioral health services. Like, oh my God, what they're going to need. And I'm only imagining what they're going to need. I don't even know the full story, and I'm not an expert in that kind of law enforcement or child and family services, but I know somebody who is. And that's the guy who's been through this. That's the guy who showed up at the Turpin's home. That's the guy who opened that door and walked in on 13 tragedies and one big fucking crime. The Turpins, that story, that stays with you. What happened to those children, that stays with you. And retired Riverside County Detective Thomas Salisbury, my feeling is that stays with him too, because that was his case. First on the scene of the first crime of the Turpin parents and what they did to their children, and then the subsequent crimes of what the foster system and those people in the system did to those victims a second time. And he was kind enough to join me and talk all about it and tell me what we can expect is happening right now in this case, in the Siders case, and what's going to happen in the future with the kids. Here's my conversation with him. Detective Salisbury, thank you so much for joining the podcast. I so wanted to speak with you about this Ohio case. You've had a chance to read in on this case. What was your initial reaction given your background and your history on the Turpin case?
You know, there's such a correlation with the ages of the kids and everything and the amount of them and how they were being kept and treated that it just brings back a flood of memories of that specific case. And when I first saw them, when I walked into the station, it was heartbreaking.
I mean, we hear that word and it's hard to even know what it is, the things you've seen. Can you take me to that day when you first encountered the Turpin children?
Yes. So when I first encountered them, I had previously spoken with a sergeant on the phone to respond out, and he asked me from directions on what to do with the kids and adults, and I told him where to transport them and put them at the station. And when I got there, our station was a square with an open center courtyard. And 3 or 4 of the kids were out there like Holocaust refugees, literally walking around with their arms and hands up toward the sun.
As
And
though that was the first time they'd maybe seen the sun or that they rarely saw the sun?
yes. They rarely saw the sun. They were rarely ever allowed to go out. Although they did take minor trips here and there, they were very quick, controlled trips. Everyone had to act a certain way, or they knew they would pay the price when they got back home if they didn't. And visually, it soulfully hurt me to see them and the condition that they were in, and the horrid, rancid condition of their clothing. It was overwhelming. And so when I heard these kids in Ohio were confined to a room with feces and fecal matter and probably urine everywhere and not a clean spot to lay, yeah, it hurts your brain to think how they felt.
I mean, I don't know of any case where prisoners are kept in these conditions where you have 16 people in 12 by 12. I don't even know how you could seat or lie 16 bodies down to sleep in that small a space.
I totally agree with you. My childhood bedroom was about that same size, and we had 4 boys in that room, and it was crowded then. So yeah, but it is hard to imagine all those kids in that one room being treated like they are, and it does make you wonder, at what point did you not want to reach out for help? You have to be aware, based on the ages of the adults, they had to have been aware that what was going on was wrong.
You know,
And I don't know
you
why
wonder
none
though,
of
right?
them
I
would not
think you
reach out for
wonder.
help.
You wonder if the older children even knew what was wrong. I've read reports from child psychologists who say some of these kids grow up in such a Stockholm syndrome, they think this is normal and that there's nothing wrong with it.
Yes, that's exactly what happened to the Turpin kids. It was at the point where if they had to go to the restroom and they were chained up, their sibling would unchain them, and they would go to the bathroom and come back and chain themselves back up, and they had to be chained at a certain link in the chain. So it had to be like put it on the fifth link, and that's where the lock had to be if Mama Louise went to check on them.
That it was that specific and premeditated and clear-eyed that they knew that much about the kind of torture that they were inflicting on these kids.
Yes, and the Turpins knew their routine. The Turpin kids, they knew what their routine was, and they knew not to violate the routine, or there would be consequences. And the consequences were being chained up. I was really surprised when I talked to Louise, the mother, and she told me how long she had had them chained up and the various restraining devices that they had gone through to that point.
Did she not think there was anything wrong with it? Was she that candid because she thought it was okay?
That was her way of controlling them, like you might chain up a dog who is eating too much dog food, in their opinion, or sneaking dog food without your permission. So yeah, when uh, when she first agreed to talk to me, and I said I wanted to get right to it, and I asked her about the chaining, she got a serious look on her face and looked across the table at me and said, "You know what those kids did?" And I go, "No, I don't have any idea what they did to be chained up." They stole candy. And I was like, oh, I mean, I literally laughed and snickered. Not that I didn't believe her, but I couldn't believe that you would chain someone up, a child, for sneaking candy.
I mean, I guess I can believe it, just given the horrors that they endured, these kids. I'm trying to get my head around the ages of the ones in Ohio. Again, similar to the Turpins, 18, 16, 15, 14, 13, 11, 9, 8, 6, 5, twin 4-year-olds and twin 20-month-olds.
Yes.
Can you give me a feel for what the Turpin kids told you about how the older ones clearly would have had to care for the babies?
No, in the Turpin house, that was a 24-hour occurrence practically. The older kids love their littlest, who's still minor at this time. But yeah, they wanted to dote over her. It gave them a sense of something to do in the house that made them feel good. So yeah, the youngest definitely got the most attention from the upper siblings, but throughout the course of their lifetime, the older siblings sort of became the prison guards of the house, responsible for chaining and unchaining the kids up, responsible for feeding them at a certain time in an orderly manner, and expected to report back to mom or dad, David or Louise, if there was any violations.
Spies. They were turned into spies.
Yeah, they were turned into guards, is what we called them, because they had to stand by and made sure no one took food they weren't supposed to. They had to do security rounds. Yeah, so it was a job for them. And then at one point, the majority of the younger Turpins were placed in a trailer 45 miles from where mom and dad and a few of the older ones were living in a residential suite.
I can fully understand why some of the older kids would take on the role of guard. That's the way they were conditioned. That's the way they were manipulated. That's the orders they lived under, and no one would ever fault them for that. But do you find that the older kids tried to protect the younger kids from what they knew was sure to be the abuse that they had already endured for years?
Yes, 100%. I think they gladly accepted that role rather than deal with the anger of David and Louise directly with the children, that they could insert themselves as buffers between them and actually help the little ones. And that's what happened during their whole life. And the older kids wouldn't always tell on the younger ones if a violation was committed, but they did have to apply pressure not to commit those violations because that put them in a bad position also. And the younger kids came to understand that.
Yeah, I mean the pressures that they were all under, the horrors and the torture, in the condition in the Siders circumstance, the medical conditions of these kids was so dire that one's in critical condition, two had to be life flighted, everybody had to go to the hospital. When you heard that description, did that deviate somewhat from what you witnessed in the Turpin's case?
No, luckily I had worked special victim unit crimes and started up the drug endangered children program in our area, and I worked hand in hand with a lot of surrounding hospitals and child pediatricians and nutritionists, and our components of the DEC program included everything. And so I recognized which hospitals I felt would be able to best handle the adults and which hospital would be best fitted to handle the kids. And it worked out perfectly, especially regarding the assessment, the care, the documentation, and medical information that we could use in the case against the Turpin parents.
In the initial rescue, were the Turpin children in as rough shape as it appears these kids were? I mean, we've got reports that one girl at 18 cannot write out her own name. Some of the kids cannot speak. And of course, there was this life flight helicopter service for two of the kids and one in critical condition. Were the Turpins in that bad a shape as these Siders children are?
Not even close. The Turpin kids found their happiness, the most happiness they could grab in their world was feeding off each other and teaching each other. And so while there was no formal class set up, hardly ever, the older kids would help school and educate and learn the younger kids. And it went all the way down the line. It just didn't stop with the two oldest ones and the two next oldest ones. It went all the way down to the youngest one. And they would have their own school books. And so as far as talking goes, they weren't, sometimes there were restrictions from talking, but not as long as it was in a low voice and not bothering mother.
Right.
But in this case, in the Ohio case, yeah, where they've received zero education and no one within that group had the ability to trickle down their educational or reading or writing stuff. Yeah, that's, uh, that puts those kids so far behind. As you know, the Turpin children really excelled, especially within these past few years, as to what they were able to do and what they're able to do now, where they were at physically, where they're at now, mentally, emotionally, everything.
Well, my God, the description that the Attorney General, Andy Wilson, gave of these kids, he said they were akin to being feral,
Yeah,
meaning
yeah, I heard him use
they're
that term, and that unfortunately, sadly, is I believe the correct term to use. They would have they had no guidance their whole life. They were just put out and on their own to survive.
the road ahead, for these kids. You mentioned the Turpin kids have done pretty well for themselves. They've managed to overcome insurmountable odds. Knowing what you know about this Ohio case, and I know you've kept close to the some of those kids, the Turpin kids, so you know how they're doing. What are your thoughts about how these Siders kids are going to fare in the future?
Uh, I truly want to believe that all the multidisciplinary teams that need to be put forth to these kids will be provided with them without fail, and that there will be oversight and goals and everything for these kids. And I don't even like this term that kids are very resilient, but they are, because it makes it sound like they can come back from anything. But a lot of times, mental and emotional abuse is way worse than any physical abuse that could be inflicted upon kids. And this is where these apparently are, is the neglect and the emotional abuse and the mental abuse. And I believe it's going to be a long process for them. And I hope there's a lot of top professionals who identify themselves and step forward to help with these kids.
I hope so too, but I mean, I mentioned it before, I'll say it again. I want to be very guarded in my optimism only because I saw what happened after the Turpin kids were rescued and put into the safe system that was there supposedly to protect them after the hell they'd been through. And some of the hell they went through in the foster system was worse than what they endured in Louise and David's home. Talk to me a little bit about that.
Well, you know, the Department of Public Social Services could have done and should have done a way better job at planning and assessing what to do with these children after they were taken in from the first case. And I constantly voice my opinion that if every child, every Turpin was going to receive services from multi-disciplines, then why don't we put all the Turpins in one house, the adults and the kids, with CPS supervisors, and have all the professionals come to the house? And it would be like a classroom setting for them, or a doctor's office where all the kids are already there, instead of spreading them out throughout the county. Because the Turpins thrive off each other. They love each other. I mean, brotherly, sisterly love. Like I've got three brothers and three sisters that we never saw in our family. I mean, yeah, they showed it on their face. They said it all the time. So that's a big difference between the Turpin kids and these kids too, though. A
that,
big,
that
big
they have that
difference.
support. Yeah,
Yes.
and I have no idea just how bad it is in the Ohio case. I suspect, with just the scant details that we have, that it is as bad as it gets. But I suspect also that human nature is that these children only had each other in that room, and that those four adults were possibly the enemy they had to live with, rather than the enemy they wanted to live with.
Yeah, I don't think any of them wanted to live in a 12 by 12 fecal covered
Dungeon.
room.
Yeah.
I'm surprised he didn't have pets in there too. And that's a similar condition to where all those Turpin kids were in the trailer when they lived away. The kids described the house was so dirty, you couldn't lay down without getting dirty, on top of the dirty that they already are or were. And that some of their best friends there were some dogs that lived in the trailer with them, and that they named these dogs, and they would talk to the dogs, have conversations with the dogs.
I think I recall hearing something in the Turpin case, and you would know better than I, that some of these kids were only allowed to have a bath or a shower once a year.
Yeah, they could wash their hands. You could see the caked on dirt all over their bodies. Uh, we forensically collected the clothing that they had on, and of course, photographed them. And there wasn't really a clean spot on them. And I myself wondered from looking at it, because you could tell it had been there for years, if it was going to come off. But yeah, their clothing alone, the majority of girls had the same underwear on for nearly a year, and the same with the boys. And their pajamas were the same way. All their clothing, you can see the stains in a bunch of the clothing, but yet they had new clothes hanging in the closet there that they weren't allowed to wear.
Are you kidding me?
Oh no, they had brand new clothes with tags on it, but they were only allowed to wear that good clothing for the special events that they did. Other than that, they could not wear it in the house because mom didn't want to do laundry.
Oh my God. I mean,
And
we've seen the pictures, right, of the thing one, two, two, three, four, five out at Disneyland, and then this ridiculous renewal of vows where they're all dressed in matching outfits. That's what you're talking about. They had a fancy outfit they weren't allowed to wear, and they wore absolute filth and squalor every day without laundering. I mean, imagine for a year, children not being able to launder the clothes they're wearing.
yeah, and it just wasn't those fancy outfits they had. They had normal looking clothing hanging up in their closet with tags on it that they were not allowed to wear.
It's
Absolutely.
just unfathomable. I just, I can't wrap my head around it. There's obviously, there has to be an extraordinary mental illness component with those Turpin parents. And, good riddance to them. They're locked away for life. I don't even care how they're festering in their own personal hell and their jail cells. But I wanted to ask you about the charges that we're seeing, and this is early. We're only a week into this, but the Siders, there are four of them, grandpa, grandma, mom, and dad. And I don't know who fathered or mothered whom. I only assume that the children at this point are the products of the younger couple. I can't be sure of that. But they're only charged with child endangerment. 16 counts each, which is nothing to sneeze at, but only child endangerment. And the Turpins had torture and false imprisonment. So tell me where you think the investigators might be going in the Ohio case.
Well, I know our district attorney, when we submit cases regarding child abuse, they may see it from a different perspective that we do, especially from a different legal prosecution perspective. In our case, yes, our prosecution didn't file the highest charges till all the medical documentation came back supporting that torture charge. And once that came back, that these kids were literally tortured, then that's when they thankfully pled guilty to save what I feared would be the biggest circus of all time.
I could not imagine what it would have been like for those children to have to go into court and face those parents and then face the world. I just can't. And so thank God for that. But, I do look at the torture charge because you're not going to prison for life on child endangerment. 16 charges, maybe, if they can get them, to not be concurrent, that would make a difference. But you're not going to prison for as long as they deserve to go to prison for. So do you expect that they will be looking to these kinds of charges, false imprisonment and torture? Because there aren't chains or cages apparently in Ohio, and there were in Turpin's.
I don't think you need the chains or anything else for torture. I think torture is obviously it's been used in POW camps. You don't feed them. You lock them somewhere and they're not allowed out. And these are kids we're talking about. who could not grow physically because they don't have enough nutrition. I would guarantee all of them are underweight, and a few of them may have been on the verge of death, especially the younger ones that aren't even that old yet. And so the torture, unfortunately, is different in the penal code than what it is in our minds. But I don't think there would be anyone who would disagree that the Turpins were tortured by their parents and then by the foster parents.
Well,
Just,
and in
just
this
different
case
ways.
too. Yeah, I mean, look, it's mental torture, it's physical torture if you're hungry and starving all the time, and clearly you just mentioned the medical situation. Two of them were life flighted, not because someone called 911 about a crisis, because they were discovered that way. So who knows how long they've been that way? Who knows how long the others might have been in a condition like that at some point? And one is already listed as critical. So I mean, the statute may or may not support torture, but false imprisonment, can you make a case for false imprisonment if you don't have chains or locks, but you have threats and fear?
Yes, yes, you definitely can. People can. I've had men that would kidnap women and keep them at their house for 6 years and sexually assault them every day of their life. And a lot of people have a hard time swallowing it was kidnapping, but it was more than that. It was kidnapping with sexual assault, and that makes it a lifetime felony.
Yeah, the fear and the terror. I mean, terror is real.
And I know they said these kids cannot talk, but I guarantee you there are specialists out there who can convey to law enforcement and prosecutors what these kids are showing them just by their mannerisms.
Let's talk about that because the statements from these kids, in whatever form they'll come in, those are going to be critical, aren't they?
They're going to be very critical. Even if they can only barely articulate what they're trying to convey. They can't, obviously, they're not going to come in there with detailed information and dates and times and everything like that. And they may not have even been aware of any seasonal stuff just regarding the holidays. I'm sure they could tell when it was winter, when it was summer, in spring and fall. I'm sure they can guess around those seasons, but so a prosecutor will develop a full timeline based on the information they can get from the kids they can communicate with, and then verify it through the younger ones in some manner.
And that will end up being the most damning evidence likely of all, other than the physical crime scene.
Yes, because children have a tendency to tell the truth, regardless of the circumstances. In the Turpin's case, it was hard for them to initially tell us the truth. And the more each child told us, the more we would verify through the other children. And then, of course, up to the parents, where the parents were questioned about exactly what happened and usually verified it. So, yeah, that's very good because if they tell you things, you can go back and look for those things. It may be something small. Dad hit me with this. Okay, can we go find that?
Right.
Stuff like that. And so, but the fact one of them is in the hospital in critical condition, that shows, and two other had to be life flighted out of the concerns for their livelihood. To me, you have three counts of kidnapping for torture right there, if they never let them out. And the states might not believe it's kidnapping, but it is kidnapping if you're holding them hostage.
Yeah, listen, I learned that in the OJ case, the second OJ case. It was kidnapped because he moved people from one side of the hotel room to the other under a weapon threat. And that was all you needed for kidnapping. So kidnapping is not what everybody thinks it is. It can certainly exist in a circumstance like this. Kids held in a 12 by 12 room without the ability to move freely. I just wanted to ask one more thing about evidence. The children's physical condition is obviously one of the biggest pieces of evidence. And in
Yes,
the
it is.
Turpin's case, the medical records, and I think, correct me if I'm wrong, had one of the kids who was 14 years old weighed the same as a 3-year-old.
Yes.
I mean, how are the others? If that's just the 14-year-old, what were the conditions like in terms of the body weight of the others?
They were all extremely emaciated, all of them. They literally looked like internment camp refugee pictures I've seen from World War II. The same paleness, the same skin on bone, everything, everything. Yeah, and unbathed, unshowered, no clothes, no clean clothes for a year. So yeah, they literally look like the Turpins did because they were somewhat taller and older. But yeah, it was horrendous. But like I said, uh, life is good to them now, and you could compare the pictures then and now, and you would just shake your head in non-belief about how much they thrive and how much they care about themselves now.
Well, talk to me about that because, Detective, I think you spent 42 years, was it, with the Riverside County Sheriff's Department? Is that right before you retired?
I did 38 and a half with the Riverside County Sheriff's Department, and then started out my career in the great state of West Virginia, outside of Charleston, West Virginia, as a law enforcement officer.
So that's the additional 4 years that took you to the
Yeah,
42.
42.
Yeah, it's a lot of years as someone who's helping others.
Yeah, when I
And
walked into the station and they told me David and Louise were initially from West Virginia, I knew I was in the right spot.
I bet you
I
did.
knew I could build a rapport just off that alone.
God, that's incredible. The the care and the concern that you had, this wasn't just a case for you. You maintained relationships with these kids. Tell me a little bit about them. And I'm trying to think about the Ohio kids and what's ahead for them. I don't know that it's going to be a carbon copy. It sounds like it's medically different. Perhaps it'll be physically, mentally different, but it's essentially a lot of the same principles in this story. I want to feel optimistic, and I'd love to hear a little bit about how the Turpin kids are doing now and what you know about them.
Well, I will say that after the first case, there were so many professionals involved in the Turpin case that I didn't interact with them very much, but probably between 18 and 21, maybe I saw them 3 times, and it was in their foster home setting. So if I was unaware of some of the complaints that were made to CPS and ChildNet by the Turpins about what was going on there.
In the foster homes.
Right, because we, being law enforcement, never got notified by CPS. We received calls for service there, but they were from the Turpin family members who called CPS to relay what their sisters had told them. But the Turpins, even from their original parents, had learned if you talk to the police and the parents or step parents know, there's going to be repercussions. So don't talk. The police will figure it out. And sometimes it takes us a while to figure it out. I was surprised how many reports we didn't get. We didn't get cross reports regarding physical abuse, emotional abuse, mental abuse, sexual abuse. We didn't get those reports.
I saw an interview where you described the abuse of a 5-year-old child inside one of the homes where the Turpin children were able to witness what went on. And I think it involved a square that was taped on the floor and a 5-year-old child who was forced to stand there. And despite exhaustion, if she fell from exhaustion, she'd be tortured in some way. Can you describe what it was that the Turpin kids saw happening in this foster home?
Well, yeah, they saw her being locked in her room for practically 24 hours a day, without the means to or access of a bathroom or food. They saw her dragged around by her hair. They saw her thrown into a small bathroom that had a fan that made like scary noise for a 5-year-old little black girl. One time there was even a big spider in there, and they told her the spider was going to eat her up and threw her in there. So this was a special needs 5-year-old that was placed with a brand new foster mother with less than a year experience, being assisted by her mother, who was already mentally, emotionally, physically abusing the Turpin kids on a daily basis.
What happened to the little girl when she was forced to stand in the square?
She'd pass out. She'd get items thrown at her. The foster, I'll call him grandfather, would actually kick her over. They'd knock her down. They call her names, and they continuously referred to her by the N word.
This is a 5-year-old little girl.
Yeah, the 5-year-old special needs girl.
And she's in the same home where the Turpins were sent supposedly to be protected after their horrifying ordeal with their parents.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
I can't ask you how the hell does that happen because it's not your purview. It's just that you responded to both. I mean, you responded to the initial emergency and you worked on that case. Did you ever think for a minute, Detective Salisbury, that you were going to have to investigate and prosecute another case of child abuse against the Turpin kids?
No, no. I felt there had to be enough professionals involved that could never happen. And that was the response I got from a lot of those professionals when I started seeking information to establish that what happened did happen. And a lot of them were hesitant to give it to me, straight up, to be honest with you. And it didn't have to go down the way it went down, which was hurtful to the Turpins that were still in that home, because regardless of what those foster parents did to them, they still referred to them as Mama and Papa, and didn't want to see them get in any trouble, much like they didn't want their own parents to get in any trouble.
I asked before, I'll ask again. Are they all okay? I mean, relatively speaking, given what they've been through.
Yeah, I think anyone who's involved, I think Janet, there may be some that have extended services, victim services through them, but the majority of them, I believe, are capable of walking away from Department of Public Social Services anytime, be it CPS, Child Protective Services, or Adult Protective Services. And I think there's more people in the future based on this last case and the lawsuit against the county and CPS, that people are now going to be willing to help not only the Turpins more than they may have paid attention before. I think a lot of other kids are going to benefit by what happened in that case and the changes that have been made.
Well, I sure hope that the state of Ohio has a magnifying glass on all 16 of these kids because God forbid that anything else happen to them after this. They've suffered enough and we don't even know the half of it.
Uh, uh, these uh, these kids from Ohio, I hope everyone keeps them under their own little professional microscope and can do and actually do everything that will benefit these kids from basic food, life, and care services to placing them in a normal place, a place where they can be helped by professionals, by people who specialize in these types of cases.
Well, if they don't, it'll be a crime, repeated over and over that doesn't need to happen. Let's just hope as well that these kids can tell their stories and that their bodies can tell the stories that will lead to the appropriate charges against the adults who are to blame for this. It's a tragedy over and over. Detective Salisbury, thank you so much for your 4+ decades of service. Thank you for what you did for the Turpin kids, and thanks for sharing your wisdom when it comes to this Ohio case. I'm probably going to call on you again.
And if Ohio is listening, put these kids in one place and have all the professionals at that one place.
It's great
Please.
advice.
Yes.
It's great advice. Thank you again. I so appreciate this.
Okay, ma'am.
My great thanks to Detective Tom Salisbury. Like, wow, what a hero. And I'm not the only one who says that. I have heard that said multiple times about the work that he invested in the Turpin's case and the connection he had to those kids. So where are we with the Siders? Well, obviously, this is early, and the investigators are still looking for evidence and witnesses and information, and they're trying to piece together the whole puzzle. And if you know anything about this case, they're asking you to please call them. I'm going to put it up here. It's 855 BCI Ohio. That's 855 224 6446. Please call if you know anything and help get justice for these kids. We're going to keep watching this case because every single time I see something new, I am obsessed. How did this go on for as long as it did? At least 18 years. How? Who knew about this? Other than definitely 4 adults in that house knew that there were 16 kids in a room 12 by 12. You cannot not know that. Who should have known what was going on? Where was Child and Family Services? Yes, these people were traveling and showing up only within the last few years, but they were not in school. And when you're not in school, someone from the state needs to make sure. Why? Why? Because when you're not in school, it is a ripe environment to be abused. We've seen it happen multiple times. And then the biggest question, what happens now? What happens to these 16 kids whose lives may have been completely stolen from them long before investigators ever went through that door, and whose lives undoubtedly have been altered for good? I will keep my eyes on this, I promise you. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Ashleigh Banfield, and remember, the truth isn't just serious, it's drop dead serious.